All right, so we've got this mountain of research about reacting to the past. And honestly, my first thought was like role-playing, historical figures. Is this legit or just a fun way to spend class time?
Right.
But the more I dug in, the more intrigued I got. So for anyone who's clueless, paint us a picture. What does RTTP actually look like in action?
Okay, so picture this. You walk into a classroom, and instead of the French Revolution being this dry lecture, you're in it. You are Robespierre arguing for a republic, or maybe you're Marie Antoinette pleading for your life. It's about making history come alive.
Okay, see, now that does sound way more exciting than a textbook. But the question is, does all this immersive fun actually translate to learning?
Yeah, because let's be honest, sometimes lectures feel like watching paint dry. And that's kind of the whole point, right? Traditional lectures often miss the mark when it comes to keeping students engaged. RTTP, though, it taps into this competitive spirit that love for a good story learning becomes this active thing.
I keep seeing this active learning thing pop up in the research. Is that basically the gist here?
100%. The core idea being students learn best by doing, by really getting their hands dirty with the material. And when you look at the research on RTTP's effectiveness, it's compelling stuff.
Oh, really? Like, give me an example. What kind of impact are we talking?
Well, there was this one study they focused on an RTTP game about, you guessed it, the French Revolution. Students who did the game, they were twice as likely to connect historical events to what's happening in society today compared to those who just learned the traditional way. It wasn't about memorizing dates and names, it was about understanding the why, the cause and effect.
Wow. Okay, so not just more fun, but actually building some critical thinking muscles there.
Exactly. And there's this other benefit the research highlights: self-efficacy.
Self-efficacy, remind me what that is again.
It's basically a student's belief in their own ability to learn and succeed, and RTTP seems to give it a real boost.
How so?
Think about it. When students conquer these complex simulations, they gain confidence in their problem-solving skills, their ability to stick with it even when it's tough. They start to believe in themselves as learners.
Right, because if you feel capable, you're more likely to take risks, ask questions, really push yourself. But I'm also noticing some caveats in the research. It's not like you just throw on a costume and bam, instant deep learning.
You get it. It's not a magic solution. A lot hinges on how the game is designed, how the
Yeah.
instructor runs with it.
One study I found interesting, they looked at different RTTP formats, standard, pairs, even journalists. And the kicker, the format itself didn't really impact how much students learned.
Interesting, right?
So what's the takeaway there?
It suggests that RTTP's power might not be in the specifics, but in its core: active participation, tackling problems together, and that need to think critically within a historical context. It's about building an environment where those skills can shine.
So more about the experience, less about the rule book. That's fascinating. But then that begs the question. If traditional tests might not capture all the nuances of what RTTP brings, how do we even measure its effectiveness, especially beyond those immediate learning outcomes?
That is the million-dollar question, and one researchers are wrestling with right now. Because we're finding the ripple effects of RTTP, they might go way beyond just a grade on a test.
We're talking long-term impact then. How does something like RTTP actually change how a student approaches learning, even after the game's over?
It's like, think about reading about a place versus actually living there for a while. The memories, the way you see things, it's just different, more vivid after you've really been there.
I can see that. There was this one student's experience that stuck with me. They were like, at first, role-playing. Sounds kind of cheesy. But then they said it was one of the most engaging things they'd done in college. What changed for them?
I think it shows how RTTP can really resonate with students who might not thrive in a typical classroom setup. There's even research connecting RTTP to feminist pedagogy, which is interesting.
Okay, I've heard that term, but break it down for me. How does that connect to what we're talking about here?
So at its core, feminist pedagogy is about creating this learning environment that's more inclusive, more empowering. It's about valuing different perspectives, challenging those old power structures you find in classrooms, and really encouraging students to find their voice. And RTTP really aligns with that because it gives students agency. They're not just sitting there soaking up information. They're actively shaping what's happening.
That makes sense. And that's got to be especially crucial for students who feel, I don't know, marginalized maybe, or like they're not heard in a traditional classroom. But by taking on these different roles, they get to engage with power dynamics, social structures, different viewpoints in a way that really hits home. Like you said, it's about living history, not just reading about it.
Exactly. And when students feel empowered to bring their own ideas, their own interpretations to the table, it can be huge for their confidence, their whole approach to learning. They start to see themselves as active participants in how they understand the world.
It's funny, we talk about classrooms as these controlled spaces, right? Like a museum, everything carefully curated. But RTTP, it's like tossing students into the historical mosh pit.
Oh, I love that analogy because it really captures that energy, that unpredictable nature of RTTP. There's definitely a degree of chaos, having to think on your feet, adapt on the fly.
Right.
And honestly, that's way closer to how we navigate the real world outside of a classroom.
Right. It's not always neat and tidy. We're constantly getting hit with new information, complex problems with no easy answers.
So are we saying that RTTP is actually doing a better job at prepping students for that reality than traditional methods?
It certainly seems to be honing skills that are in high demand these days.
Mm-hmm.
Critical thinking, collaboration, problem solving, thinking on your feet, communicating persuasively.
These are things you need, whether you're in a boardroom making a point or just having a disagreement with a friend. It's bigger than historical facts. It's about developing that flexible, adaptable mindset.
It's almost like, I don't know, less about memorizing the past and more about like giving students the tools to actually shape the future.
Now you're talking. And that gets to the heart of what we've been saying about RTTP, you know?
Yeah.
It's not just a teaching method, it's a whole different way of thinking.
So instead of this like history set in stone, untouchable thing, RTTP is like, go ahead, jump in, get your hands dirty.
Yes. It helps them see that history, well, it's messy, full of different perspectives, interpretations, and that's big because it encourages them to question, to think for themselves.
This whole deep dive has really been eye-opening. I mean, we've covered how RTTP can make learning more engaging, how it can boost those critical thinking skills, even empower students in ways a traditional classroom might not.
And we've only scratched the surface. There's so much more to uncover the ins and outs of designing these games, the challenges of really measuring what students are learning.
It sounds like a rabbit hole I'm ready to jump down, honestly. So for our listeners who are feeling that same pull, where should they go from here? Where do they start?
Well, the Reacting to the Past website is a gold mine. They've got info on all sorts of game themes, resources for instructors, even stories from students and educators who've used it.
So someone could actually find a game to be a part of, like experience RTTP firsthand. That'd be a pretty unforgettable history lesson.
For sure. And who knows? Maybe you'll discover a hidden talent for diplomacy or, start a revolution.
Or at the very least, you walk away with a better understanding of just how complex the past is and how much it still shapes us today. This has been awesome. Thanks for geeking out with me on this.
Anytime. Always love exploring these new ways of learning.
Until next time, everyone, stay curious out there. You never know what you might find.